Tonight, before the town fully falls asleep, I will gently tell you a few quiet stories. This is the first one, a small and simple case about something that seemed lost but was never truly gone. My name is Detective Milo, and I prefer to begin when everything else becomes calm. Tonight, the town settled into its gentle quiet, the kind that comes slowly and without effort, like a soft blanket being drawn over the world. One by one, the lights in the windows faded into a warm glow, and even the air itself seemed to soften, as if it too was preparing to rest. Nights like this were always my favorite. My name is Detective Milo, and I have long believed that the quietest hours are the ones that reveal the most. When everything slows down, even the smallest details begin to stand out, and things that might be missed during the day quietly wait to be noticed. I was sitting at my desk, the soft light of my lamp resting across the pages of my notebook. There was nothing urgent to solve, no hurried footsteps, no loud disturbances, just stillness. And then, almost without warning, I felt it. A small shift in the calm. It wasn't a sound, and it wasn't something I could see. It was simply the quiet sense that somewhere nearby, something was not quite as it should be. I have learned to trust that feeling, not to question it, but to follow it gently. I stood, took my coat, and stepped outside. The night air was cool and steady, and the streets were empty in the most peaceful way. The soft glow of the lamps stretched across the path ahead, and my steps made almost no sound as I walked. There was no reason to rush. Mysteries like these do not disappear. They wait. It did not take long to reach the place where the quiet felt slightly different. Inside the room, everything appeared calm at first. The bed was neatly arranged, the blanket resting in soft folds, and the shadows lay quietly along the edges of the walls. Nothing seemed disturbed, and yet, something was missing. A teddy bear. I paused, allowing myself a moment to take in the space without searching too quickly. Some things cannot be found by looking everywhere at once. They are found by understanding what has changed. The absence was small, but it mattered. The place where the teddy bear usually rested felt empty in a way that was easy to overlook, yet impossible to ignore once noticed. The room itself seemed slightly less settled, as if it, too, was aware that something comforting was no longer there. I moved closer, not searching, but observing. The floor was smooth and undisturbed. There were no signs of anything being taken away, no sudden movements, no scattered objects. Everything remained exactly where it should be, which meant the answer had to be close. I turned my attention to the bed. The blanket lay softly, but as I looked more carefully, I noticed something subtle. A slight unevenness, barely visible unless one was paying close attention. It was not a clear mark, just a gentle suggestion that something had shifted across the surface. I let my eyes follow that small detail. Perhaps the teddy bear had been moved. Not taken, not lost, simply moved. I checked beside the bed, slowly and without expectation. Nothing. I paused again, allowing the quiet to settle. Sometimes, when the answer does not appear right away, it is because the mind is trying too hard to find it. And so, I did what I always do in moments like this. I slowed down even more. I stepped back slightly and looked at the room as a whole, not as a collection of places to search, but as a single calm space. And then I noticed something else. Near the edge of the bed, the blanket dipped ever so slightly lower than the rest. It was a small detail, easy to miss, but it suggested that something had slipped past the edge rather than been placed somewhere new. That was enough. I lowered my gaze and allowed my eyes to adjust to the soft darkness beneath the bed. The shadows there were gentle, not deep or empty, just quiet. And there, resting peacefully, was the teddy bear. Not far away, not hidden, simply just out of sight, where it had slipped without being noticed. I reached down slowly and lifted it back into the warm light. In that moment, the room felt whole again. Nothing else had changed, yet the feeling of the space softened, as if everything had quietly returned to its proper place. There had been no complicated mystery, no sudden disappearance, only a small, quiet movement that went unnoticed, as many things do. I placed the teddy bear gently back where it belonged and remained for a moment longer, allowing the calm to settle fully. The room no longer felt incomplete, felt ready for rest. Satisfied, I stepped back into the night. The town remained as it had been, peaceful and still, with only the soft glow of the lamps watching over it. As I walked home, I thought about how often things seem lost when they are simply nearby, waiting to be found. There is no need to rush, no need to search everywhere at once. When we slow down, when we allow ourselves to notice rather than react, the answers appear in the simplest and quietest ways. Back at my desk, I closed my notebook and dimmed the lamp. Another small case gently solved. And once again, the night returned to its calm, steady rhythm, just as it should be. Now, as the night continues and the quiet grows even deeper, I will tell you the second story. A gentle case about a sound that seemed strange at first, but was never meant to cause worry. My name is Detective Milo, and I have learned that the night does not always stay completely silent. Sometimes it carries small sounds, soft enough to be misunderstood. Tonight, the town rested peacefully, wrapped in a calm that felt steady and unbroken. The streets were empty, the windows dim, and the warm glow of the lamps stretched quietly across the ground. Everything seemed as it should be, and yet, there was something more. I sat at my desk, allowing the stillness to settle around me, when I noticed a faint disturbance in the quiet. It was not immediate, and it did not demand attention. It simply appeared softly, as if it had always been there. A sound. Gentle footsteps. They were light, almost careful, as though someone or something was moving slowly through the night, trying not to be noticed. The sound did not repeat in a steady rhythm. It came and went, quiet and uncertain, just enough to make the silence feel different. I did not react quickly. Sounds like these are not understood by chasing them. They are understood by listening, and by allowing them to reveal their pattern in their own time. I remained still for a moment longer, letting the night settle again, and then I stepped outside. The air was calm and cool, and nothing around me seemed disturbed. The street remained empty, the lamps steady, the shadows soft and unmoving. There were no signs of anything unusual, and yet the sound had been real. I walked slowly, not toward where I thought the sound had been, but toward where the quiet felt slightly less complete. It is not always the sound itself that leads to the answer, but the space it leaves behind. As I moved, I listened carefully. There it was again. Soft footsteps, closer this time, but still gentle, still uncertain, as though they belonged to something small. They did not carry weight, nor urgency. There was no sign of fear, no sense of danger. Only movement. I paused and let the sound pass once more. Then I looked around, not for what was loud or obvious, but for what was subtle. Near the edge of a small path, I noticed something faint. Not a clear mark, not a footprint in the usual sense, but a slight disturbance in the dust, barely visible unless one was looking for it. It suggested something small had passed by. Not quickly, not heavily, just quietly. I followed this gentle trail with my eyes, allowing each small detail to guide the next. The path did not lead far. In fact, it remained close, almost as if whatever had made the sound had no intention of going anywhere at all. That was interesting. Most things that move through the night have a purpose. They go from one place to another, but this movement felt different. It stayed nearby. I listened again. The footsteps returned, softer now, almost fading into the night itself. And then I noticed it, near a small corner, where the light from the lamp barely reached. Something shifted. A small shape, kitten. It moved slowly, carefully, placing each step with quiet attention, as if it were exploring the night for the very first time. Its movements were light, uncertain, and gentle, exactly like the footsteps I had heard. There was no mystery in the way one might expect. No hidden presence. No unknown cause. Only a small creature, moving through the quiet, unaware that its careful steps had been noticed. I remained still, allowing the moment to settle. The kitten paused as well, as if sensing the calm around it, and then gently curled into a small, quiet space, no longer moving at all. The sound disappeared, and with it, the feeling of disturbance faded completely. The night returned to its steady calm, as if nothing had ever interrupted it. There had been no reason to worry, only a sound, unfamiliar at first, that became clear once observed with patience. I took one last look around, making sure everything was as it should be. The streets remained quiet, the lamps continued to glow, and the small footsteps that once seemed mysterious had found their place within the night. As I made my way back home, I thought about how easily quiet sounds can feel unfamiliar, and how quickly the mind tries to understand them before simply observing. There is no need to hurry, no need to assume. When we listen carefully and allow things to reveal themselves, even the most uncertain sounds become gentle and clear. Back at my desk, I sat once more in the warm light of my lamp. Another small case quietly understood, and the night once again remained peaceful. Now, as the night continues to settle and everything grows even quieter, I will tell you the third story. A gentle case about something that seemed to disappear, though nothing had truly been taken at all. My name is Detective Milo, and I have learned that not every mystery is about something lost. Sometimes, it is about understanding what happened in a quiet moment when no one was paying attention. The night had already wrapped the town in its calm stillness. The streets rested beneath the soft glow of the lamps, and the windows, now dim and peaceful, reflected a world that had slowed to a steady, comforting rhythm. It was the kind of night where nothing seemed likely to go wrong. And yet, even in such quiet moments, small questions can appear. I was sitting at my desk, allowing the warmth of the lamp to rest gently across the room, when I felt that familiar shift in the calm. It was not strong, and it did not disturb the quiet completely. It simply suggested that somewhere nearby, something was not quite as it should be. I did not rush. Instead, I allowed the feeling to guide me just as it always had. When I arrived, the space felt calm, but not entirely settled. Everything appeared to be in order. The floor was clean, the room undisturbed, and nothing seemed out of place at first glance. But then I noticed it. A small bowl, empty. It rested exactly where it should have been, but the absence within it was what changed the feeling of the room. It was not the bowl itself, but what was no longer there that created the quiet imbalance. I paused, taking in the space without immediately searching for an answer. There were no signs of anything unusual. Nothing had been moved, nothing had been disturbed, and there were no clear traces of anything being taken away. The calm remained, steady and unbroken, and yet the bowl was empty. I stepped closer, lowering my gaze slightly, allowing myself to observe the smallest details. The surface around the bowl was smooth, but there were faint, almost invisible marks, gentle signs that something had been there not long ago. Not taken, used. That was an important difference. Many would begin to search for what was missing, or to wonder who might have taken it. But I have learned that not every empty space is the result of something being removed unexpectedly. Sometimes it is simply the result of something being completed. I allowed that thought to settle before continuing. If nothing had been disturbed, and nothing had been taken in haste, then whatever had been in the bowl had not disappeared. It had simply been finished. Still, I continued to observe. Near the edge of the bowl, there was a faint shift in its position. Not enough to suggest force, but just enough to show that it had been touched, gently and without urgency. That meant there had been no struggle, no sudden movement, no reason to assume anything unusual. Everything pointed towards something calm, something expected. I stepped back slightly and allowed myself to look at the space as a whole once more. The quiet in the room was not the kind that follows confusion or disruption. It was the kind that follows completion, when everything has already happened and nothing more needs to be done. That was when the answer became clear. Nothing had been taken. Nothing had gone missing. The bowl was empty because it had been used, just as it was meant to be. The mystery was not about disappearance, but about assumption. It is easy to believe that something is wrong when we notice an absence, especially when we expect something to still be there. But not every absence is a problem. Sometimes it is simply the natural result of something reaching its end. I remained still for a moment longer, allowing that understanding to settle fully. The room no longer felt uncertain, felt complete. There was nothing left to search for, nothing left to question. The quiet had returned to its steady, gentle rhythm, as if it had never been disturbed at all. Satisfied, I stepped back into the night. The town remained peaceful, unchanged in its calm, with only the soft glow of the lamps stretching quietly along the empty streets. The air was still, and everything felt exactly as it should. As I made my way home, I thought about how often we misunderstand small things, especially when we expect them to be different than they are. There is no need to rush to conclusions. No need to assume something has gone wrong. When we take a moment to observe, to understand before reacting, the simplest explanations often reveal themselves. Back at my desk, I sat once more beneath the warm light of my lamp, letting the quiet settle around me. Another small case gently understood. And once again, the night remained calm, steady, and at peace. Now, as the night grows even quieter and the world drifts deeper into rest, I will tell you the fourth story, a gentle case about something that seemed to disappear from the sky, leaving behind a quiet feeling of uncertainty. My name is Detective Milo, and I have often noticed that not all mysteries begin on the ground. Some begin far above, in places we do not expect to change. The night had settled into a calm, steady rhythm. The streets were empty, the lamps glowed softly, and the sky stretched wide and peaceful overhead. It was the kind of night where everything felt still, as if nothing would shift or change. And yet, even the calmest skies can hold small questions. I was sitting by my window, allowing my eyes to rest on the quiet glow of the stars above, when I felt it, that familiar, gentle shift in the stillness. It was not strong, not urgent, but it was there, waiting to be noticed. Something felt different. I stepped outside and looked up. The sky was clear, calm, and filled with soft points of light. Each star rested in its place, quiet and distant, exactly as it should be. And yet, there was a small space that felt slightly emptier than the rest. A place where a star seemed to be missing. I did not rush to understand it. Instead, I stood still, allowing my eyes to adjust to the night, allowing the sky to reveal itself slowly. The more calmly I looked, the more clearly I could see the patterns between the stars, the gentle balance they created together. And that was when I noticed it more clearly. It was not that the sky had changed completely, but that one small point of light no longer appeared where it had been before. It was a subtle difference, easy to miss, yet once seen impossible to ignore. I lowered my gaze slightly, thinking carefully. Stars do not simply disappear. They do not fall without reason, and they do not vanish in a single quiet moment. The sky is steady, even when it feels distant and unknown. So if something seemed different, there had to be another explanation. I allowed myself to observe not just the sky, but the space around me. The windows nearby reflected the night softly. The ground remained still. Nothing around me suggested any sudden change or unusual event. The calm of the night had not been disturbed, which meant the answer was not something that had happened, but something that had been noticed differently. I looked back up. This time, I did not search for the missing star. Instead, I looked at the sky as a whole, allowing my eyes to move slowly, without focusing too quickly on any one place. And then I understood. The star had not disappeared. It had simply become harder to see. A thin, gentle layer of clouds had moved quietly across the sky, so light and soft that it was almost invisible. It did not cover everything, and it did not disturb the calm. It only softened certain points of light, making them fade just enough to seem gone. I watched carefully as the cloud continued to move, slow and steady, carried by the quiet air of the night. And after a short while, the star returned. Not suddenly, not brightly, but gently, as if it had always been there, waiting to be seen again. The sky felt whole once more. There had been no loss, no disappearance. Only a small change in how things were seen. I remained still for a moment longer, letting the calm settle completely. The night was as peaceful as before, unchanged in its quiet rhythm, steady and reassuring. Sometimes what seems missing is not truly gone. Sometimes it is simply hidden for a moment, waiting for us to look again with patience. Satisfied, I stepped back, allowing my gaze to rest on the soft glow of the sky one last time. Then I made my way home. The streets remained empty, the lamps warm, and the night as calm as it had been from the beginning. Nothing had been disturbed. Nothing had been lost. Only understood. Back at my desk, I sat once more beneath the gentle light of my lamp, letting the quiet surround me. Another small case softly revealed, and the night continued on, peaceful and complete, just as it should be. Now, as the night reaches its quietest and most peaceful moment, I will tell you the fifth story, a gentle case about something that would not open no matter how much it was tried. My name is Detective Milo, and I have learned that some mysteries are not about what is missing, but about what resists being understood. The night had grown still in the most comforting way. The streets were empty, the lamps dimmed to a soft and steady glow, and the quiet felt complete, as if the world itself had settled into rest. Nothing moved, and nothing seemed out of place. And yet, even in such calm, small frustrations can appear. I was sitting at my desk, letting the warm light of my lamp rest gently across the room, when I felt that familiar shift in the quiet. It was not sudden and it was not strong. It was simply a quiet signal that somewhere nearby, something was not working as it should. I stood and stepped outside, allowing the calm night air to guide me. When I arrived, the room was peaceful just like the others had been. Nothing seemed disturbed, and everything rested in its proper place. The bed was neat, the floor clear, and the shadows lay softly along the edges of the walls. But there, near the corner of the room, was a small wooden toy box, closed. I moved closer, observing it carefully. It was not large, and it did not appear damaged in any way. Its surface was smooth, its edges even, and there were no signs that anything had been forced or broken. And yet it would not open. I paused for a moment, allowing myself to look without trying to act too quickly. Many would try to open it again and again, using more effort each time, believing that the problem required force. But I have learned that when something does not respond, it is often because it is not meant to be rushed. So I began, as I always do, by observing. The lid rested evenly against the box, not misaligned, not stuck. There were no visible obstructions, nothing caught between the edges. Everything appeared exactly as it should, which meant the answer was not in what was visible at first glance. I lowered my gaze slightly and examined the front of the box more closely. There, near the edge, was a small detail that could easily be overlooked. A tiny latch, simple and quiet, resting in place. It was not broken and it was not hidden. It was simply unnoticed. I allowed myself a moment to consider it. The box had not refused to open. It had simply been waiting to be understood. I reached forward slowly, without force, and adjusted the latch with care. It moved easily, without resistance, as if it had never been stuck at all. Then gently I lifted the lid. It opened without effort. Inside, everything was exactly as it should be. The toys rested quietly, undisturbed, waiting patiently. Nothing had been trapped, nothing had been lost. The problem had never been the box. It had been the way it was approached. I remained still for a moment, letting that understanding settle. The room felt calm again, not just in appearance, but in feeling. The small tension that had been there before had disappeared, replaced by a quiet sense of ease. Sometimes, when something does not work, it is not because it is broken. Sometimes, it is simply because we have not yet seen how it is meant to be opened. I closed the lid gently, leaving everything as it was meant to be, and took one last look around the room. Nothing else had changed. Everything was calm. Satisfied, I stepped back into the night. The streets were still, the lamps glowing softly, and the quiet felt complete once more. As I made my way home, I thought about how often effort is mistaken for understanding, and how easily patience can reveal what force cannot. There is no need to hurry, no need to try again and again without pause. When we slow down, when we look carefully and allow things to show us how they work, even the simplest problems become clear. Back at my desk, I sat beneath the warm light of my lamp and closed my notebook. Another small case gently resolved. And the night, once again, remained peaceful, steady, and at rest.